Looking at our data visualization so far, I can ascertain that the meaningful difference in the data is reflected through the width of the bars. Instead, let's be explicit about what the pieces of data are, but incorporating text labels. So we'll go to the code, and just below the creation of the bars, we're going to create the text labels. So we'll start by typing svg.selectAll, and we're going to select all the elements within the svg element that have the class bar-label. Then we're going to bind data to them, .data, and then data. And we'll enter the interface, which allows us to then append text elements. Now it's important that they have the class bar-label, so .classed, and that will be bar-label. And we'll set the second argument to true. And then for the text, we'll use .text and a function with d and I. And so we can return the value of the data, which is d. And let's put a semicolon at the end, save it and refresh. And it looks like we have a typo, line 40, not AVG, but SVG. Save it, refresh again. Well, I don't see any text, but if we use the inspector in the developer console and click one of the bars, let's scroll down because we're not putting it within the bar. Instead, we're attaching a separate element. You can see that we have these text elements and they do have the values there. The thing is that we need to affect the attributes for each of these elements so that we can actually position and see the text. Go back to the code. And now just above the text function, let's set the X and Y position. So .attr X, and the X position is going to be 0 for now. And then let's set the Y.attr, and the Y position is going to be 20. Save that and refresh. And now they're all overlapping. Well, the Y position should probably be the same as the Y position for each of the bars. Let's go back to the code. And to do that, we're going to copy the Y position from the bars and paste it. Save that, refresh. And that looks pretty good, except that 337 is not this bar. Instead, it's the bar below it. And in fact, it looks like we're missing a value. Well, that's because by default, the positioning of the text is appearing at the top left corner of the bar. So actually 337 applies to this really long bar. So we've still got some adjustment to do. Let's go back to the code. Now we can affect the position of the Y by just affecting this return statement, but that's not the most elegant way to do it. Instead, there's an additional attribute with text elements called dy.attr dy. And what dy does is it allows us to nudge the Y value. So for the second argument, we'll type function with d and I as the arguments, and we'll return the halfway point. And so that will be the height of one bar divided by 1.5. And then we're just going to nudge it by 2 pixels. Save that and refresh. And now you can see that they're more or less centered within the bars. We're going to make some additional changes. Let's go back. One thing that might be kind of nice here is to put the text labels at the end of the bars. So let's go to the X, type function, d, I, open and close curly brackets. And so we really want them to be all the way at the end on the right side. So if we take a look sort of at the end of the bars here. And the way we do that is we use the width of the bars, which is return the value d passed into the X scaling function. Save that and refresh. Okay, so now they're at the right, but they're past the bars. So what if I want to put them within the bars? You might be thinking, all right, well, I guess I have to do something like this. Save it, refresh. No, that's not the way to do it. Instead, there is a CSS property that we can set that will change the anchor for the text. To do that, we're going to go into main.css and we'll create .bar-label and we'll set the text anchor to end. So now when we refresh the page, the text is being anchored at the end of it, not at the beginning. Let's make a few more changes. While we're in the CSS, let's set the fill to white and let's set the text size, font size to 24 pixels. Save that, refresh. And that's a little bit better. In fact, it sort of remedied our vertical positioning. It looks like it's too close to the bar. So just like there's a dy property, index.html, there's a dx property, .attr, dx. And here we're just going to nudge it back by 4 pixels. Save it, refresh, and that's looking pretty good. In using the text element, we were able to bind our data again and overlay it on top of the bars. Doing so really was the same process as creating the bars. We selected all of the elements that had a particular class, bound the data, and denoted an enter function. And then we appended the element, made sure that we applied the class to the element, and then set the properties accordingly. And with text, we have the ability to nudge it if we want using the special D properties. And in main.css, we were able to style this particular text label rather flexibly and set its anchor to end, so that way it would draw efficiently and we didn't have to go through workarounds in order to make it happen.